Welcome back to another episode. We are so grateful that you're here with us today. If this is your first time joining the show, welcome and thank you so much for being here. Make sure that you click on that subscribe button because we drop a new episode every Wednesday and you want to get that notification. And just as a reminder, you guys, if you're getting value out of these episodes, please support the show in whatever platform you're listening on. We kindly ask that you leave us a 5-star rating and a written review.
Okay, so on to today's episode. We are sitting down today with fellow marriage mentors Kevin and Michelle Davis, and this was such a fun conversation. We loved it.
Yeah, they're great.
We talk about each of our respective experiences coming from divorced families and how that shaped our early marriage experiences. We also talk about overcoming the odds and really choosing this growth producing machine we call marriage. We touch on emotional intelligence and effective communication and just overall maintaining a growth mindset in marriage.
Yeah, Kevin and Michelle have become really good friends since we recorded this episode, and they live an active life up in Montana. Kevin helps men become excellent in every aspect of their life, beginning with their relationships. He hosts a podcast called Maxed Out Man, and you can learn more about him and Michelle at maxedoutman.com. We hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. On to the show.
Hey, you guys, I'm super excited you came on board. Thank you so much. You guys are podcasters as well. I know you kind of do all sorts of different things, so I want to talk about that. But that's kind of your basic stuff. But I would like to just have everybody learn more about you guys in terms of what you do, how you got here, kind of your loves and all of those things. Just fill in the gaps for us.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having us. It's such a treat to be with you too. And to have both of you, which I think is so fun to do couples and couples, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you go.
Should we start? Where do we start?
Where do we begin? So yeah, it is actually, I need to update the website, 32 years. We have 4 kids. We live near Salt Lake City, Utah. Our kids are almost all grown. We have one left at home. And it began for us back when we first got married. When we got together, we had 5 divorces between our parents. So
wow.
My mom's married 4 times.
And then my parents married, divorced, married again to each other again. So it was kind of a disaster.
I don't know which one stuck.
Neither.
Okay.
But it was kind of a crap show for both of us growing up and not a lot of modeling. So, we thought, we've got love and love is enough. And we're going to make this love and lust is going to carry it through.
Yeah, lust is the center to all good marriages, right?
It is. But if you think, and I know Charlotte's probably going to get to the stats, and it wasn't until I think we did another podcast, we didn't realize how doomed we were. And I say that in real terms. So if we're a couple and we come together and the woman in the relationship is from a divorced home, it's 63% more likely that couple will then split. They'll get divorced.
Wow.
If the man is coming from a divorced home, only the man, then it's somewhere in the mid 40s, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if both are from divorced homes, it's like 189% likelihood that they'll get divorced. So, we talk about sort of these 3 phases of our relationship. And the first phase is we never should have made it.
Nope.
And truth be told, if we fast forwarded 20 or 30 years and we got married in today's world, in today's culture, we would have
not made it.
Relationships are much more disposable than they used to be, and marriage is much, it wasn't the right fit, it's fine, and go on. So yeah, we sort of gutted it out and we
went through a lot of struggle.
Wish that we would learn some things. And as Charlotte alluded to, we just didn't have a lot of great modeling. Like, my mom was great at raising her voice and screaming and that's how I thought you solved disagreements.
Yep. So both coming from, not super secure attachment ourselves with poor modeling and really no skills, no premarital counseling. We just wanted to figure out a way to save us, right? And then the more we got into doing coaching work, we started working, I worked individually initially with women. And I started finding that when they would bring their partner on board, that things just magically happened in all areas of their life. So once they were solid in their relationship, even though they might be coming to me for business coaching initially, this was years ago, once their partner was on board, it affected every area of their life. When your relationship is secure, healthy, and solid, it impacts your work. It impacts spirituality. It impacts family. It impacts community. It has this trickle-down effect to every area of our life. And that's really where our passion towards helping couples began was, wow, we can make a difference and an impact in so many parts of people's lives by helping them with their relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So with Max Out Man, we obviously deal mostly with men, but we kind of have these, everybody has their pillars, right? So it's man, which is, health, fitness, those kind of things. Mission, which is purpose and business and those things. But the central point that I work around is marriage. Because without the marriage at the center, and we use this kind of pain point thing when you talk about marketing, which is, hey, you've got everything together, everybody looks up to you, but when you show up at a party, everybody can tell how miserable you are as a couple, right? Yeah. And so that's like that central hub, and I'm super thankful for Michelle because we don't, it's getting better, right?
Depends on the day. No. Yeah, it definitely is.
It's life work, right? It's a life work to work on your relationship. And we often share this metaphor over and over on our podcast, but we really relate it to the metaphor in the Bible that talks about the refiner's fire, and in the refiner brings in the metal, they melt down gold, silver, whatever. The dross rises up to the surface, which is the impurities from that metal, and removes it so that the metal can be reshaped. And to me, that's the analogy of marriage, because we get to see each other. We get to see our reflection in each other. We get to mirror back to one another ourselves and the ways that we are still hugely immature, very much still underdeveloped. And we get to take that as an opportunity, if we'll look at that as an opportunity and go, how can I be refined here? How can I continue to grow? And this isn't something that we go, oh, I made it. We're here. We've arrived.
Yeah.
It's life work.
Yeah. It's the journey of allowing your relationship to grow you as an individual and realizing that we all have our own path, and that I may not be growing as fast as Charlotte is growing in one area, or vice versa. And having a little grace for your partner as long as they're trying and growing, that's part of the part, because we're allowing ourselves to grow in our, in our individual, I don't know what to say, it's not an individual relationship, but how we relate to each other
and to ourselves,
and
whether we're willing to grow on our own as well as within this relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up dross, because is it James that we just started a study on James, and right now, I don't know if you've used that app, but right now has a bunch of video studies, and he was talking about dross in the concept of that's what God does to us. Like they remove that dross over and over again until you can actually see yourself in the image of God, right? Like that mirror back is how God sees us, and to remove all that. And I love that you're bringing that back.
And our relationship with God is like that, a marriage relationship, right? The Bible refers to that quite a bit, that the bride of Christ and stuff. So, so it's cool that we imitate that within our own marriages.
Absolutely. And no other relationship really do we have that level of, where someone's going to trigger us and impact us the way that our partner does. So it really is an opportunity to look in the mirror and see how, a word that we sometimes use is something called differentiation, which is really our emotional and our psychological maturity. And differentiation is your ability to stay true to who you are and to be able to manage yourself when you're in the presence of someone who really matters to you, someone who can really impact you emotionally. And that's why this person that we get to live this life with and do this life with is that perfect mirror for us.
Yeah. And do you find that, why is it that people today have such a hard time with that? Is it just a ego? Is it selfishness? We don't do marital counseling, but we've done marital coaching anymore, but we've done premarital, we've done crisis counseling and all
mentorship.
That.
I'd say more
Mentorship
than coaching. Mentorship.
Yeah. But we noticed that there's that central element of ego and selfishness and all of that. But why, how does that dichotomy work? Like between me as an individual, Michelle as an individual, and then us as a couple will continue to grow and move forward. And why do people have such a hard time with that?
I think that part of look, I'm sorry I stepped on you there.
No, go.
I think that part of it is cultural that we have now when right everybody's like, oh, you do you and do what's best for you first. So there's a lot of this egocentric, self-centered stuff that's going on, and almost to the point where we're not even connecting anymore with other people. Like our relationships are online. We're mirrored into this device nonstop. You know, I mean, this is our focus, and heaven forbid this goes away. And I think it's hard. It's really hard to think about somebody other than yourself. I love Jordan Peterson's quote where he says, "You're never truly going to grow up until you have children, when you realize that somebody is more important than you." Mm-hmm. And the point, when you get to that point where somebody's life or somebody's happiness or somebody's care and consideration is more important than the thing that you want to do right now, right? I just want to sleep. I want to watch TV. Like once you give those things up, then you're really going to start growing as an individual, growing up, right? And so when we think about that in the relationship in the context to our partner, this person that should mean everything to us, who also knows how to trigger us absolutely positively and send us over the edge if they wanted to. When we start to sort of subjugate our needs and our wants to this other person, that is when you start to grow exponentially beyond the singular id of, what is my relationship to myself and how can I get uncomfortable? And we talk about that uncomfortable, that discomfort and that growth in all aspects of our life, like in our relationship and our physical fitness. Like you're actually not going to build strength unless you're going to get uncomfortable. You're not going to build fitness unless you're going to get uncomfortable. You're not going to lose weight or in, and maybe is there a nice term, right? We're going to change our body mass from lean body mass to non-lean body mass, right? We're not going to do any of those things unless we get uncomfortable. So life is really about getting uncomfortable. Yet the thing that is more prevalent in today's society is just do what feels right.
We're addicted to comfort.
Yeah. And just be comfortable. And I think that unless you're willing to get uncomfortable, and we see that in the couples that we coach, right? They come in and they just want to point fingers like, oh, it's their fault. Right? and you just go, well, that's a reflection of you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's so many paradoxes in marriage. It's funny because on one hand, like what Robert just said, we are so self-focused, but also it's funny because even though we are so self-focused, we are actually very much basing ourselves on the reflection that we see in ourselves from others. So we're so focused on what is happening with our social media likes and whether people like us, and we become obsessed with that. And that becomes a big part in relationships that makes it really challenging. When someone doesn't have a solid sense of self, they don't know who they are, they don't know what their values are, they don't know what their beliefs are, and they're dependent on getting a positive self-reflection from their partner in order to feel good about themselves. Otherwise, they get anxious or angry or whatever it is. That's a big piece of the problem, I think, as well. And that comes down, all of these things really come down to, if I were to put them under one big umbrella, I'd say probably emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
I think culturally we really lack the emotional intelligence to do well in managing conflicts in relationship. We let, the blaming and the triggers and all that stuff run us. We let our, feelings are important, but at the same time, so is thinking, and so is some logic occasionally. And we sometimes let these big feelings that we feel override logic. I think emotional intelligence is the ability to feel big feelings and not react in a way that you're going to regret later.
Yeah, because that's what that difference between love being, that whole love is a choice, not a feeling.
Absolutely.
Right? Because if you let your feelings dictate your behavior, you're in trouble. Because dude, on any given moment of the day, right?
Yeah. But look at the world. We're so poorly self-directed, that we can't talk about religion or politics or, Democrats or Republicans or anything without people losing their minds. Like, we need to be able to self-direct and maintain and handle those big emotions without having us react in these ways. And the same is true in relationships.
I like the way you put that. You're so much more diplomatic in this run. Because I think the first time she postulated that, I think she said emotional intelligence is the ability to have big emotions without acting like an a-hole, I think, or something. and then she altered it to a 3-year-old, which we thought was a little. I think we used the 3-year-old on the podcast, but you're getting better.
I'm getting better.
Yeah, you're self-editing, which is
well. It doesn't take long watching today's news in order to see both of those last two analogies. Yeah. 3-year-old a-holes, which I don't know if 3-year-olds are. They're kind of that way just by nature.
They are, yeah.
I think that makes sense. It's interesting what you were talking about with being a mirror, right? One of the things when she's dealing with self-esteem issues or whatever, which, we all do, I will tell her, I say, what do I say about, I wish you could see yourself the way that I see you.
Yeah.
Right. And that, because when you hear me talk about her, and it's all true, is, she's a total badass, right? And so I will always talk that. She's like, you always talk about me like I'm this superhero, which she has a fascination for
Wonder Woman. I love Wonder Woman.
But yeah, that's I feel like one of my roles as a husband is to mirror that, the best of who she is, and to make sure and communicate with her in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you're doing it right, I think you try to build each other up. And then I think the problem comes when you start to not build each other up. First step, right? We start to get lackadaisical with that, or complacent with our building our partner up. And then we get to the point where, we start to, with our friends, then we start to create negative connotations around our partner. Like, oh, he's this or she's that, or, all these types of things where you're sharing these opinions, and like that's corrosive to any relationship. One, like, you just think that doesn't sound good. People think that it's and it's the guys get together whining about their wives, or the girls get together whining about their husbands, and I don't really know how that goes, right? But think about that as a measure. So if you even feel like you're having these negative feelings about your partner, we have one rule in the thing that we coach is that any negative feedback goes exactly to that person.
Yeah.
It doesn't go to anyone else. We keep negative feedback in this circle. It's a very tight circle, right? It's me and her, right? We're a united front to everything else. So if I have feedback for Charlotte, I give Charlotte the feedback, and that's hard, right? It's hard for me to learn how to do it without getting emotional. It's hard for her to accept feedback. And it all depends on that approach. But yeah, so like one of our tenets really is like, keep it positive, build each other up, always build each other up in front of each other, build each other up in front of everyone else. And so I love that. It's like one of my favorite things to do. I say the same things. Like we joke about, well, I don't know if I joke. I don't know if she jokes about it, but I do. People say like, oh, you guys, you do the podcast. I'm like, I'm the on-air talent, man. Charlotte is the one behind the scenes, like coming up with all the excellent content. I just show up and, tell her which part I'm going to do. And then I just do it. But
I like what Robert just brought up, though, about bringing our stuff to each other. To me, that is the definition of commitment. And, there was a woman who since passed away who is a researcher, and she studied infidelity. And she wanted to know, just like John Gottman wanted to know if you could predict divorce, she wanted to know, can you predict infidelity in relationships? And one of the things that she found that could predict whether or not your partner was going to cheat was this bringing of our stuff to each other. And one of the turning points for partnerships is when one of the partners started to go inside and think, you know what, I could do better. I don't need to put up with this crap. I could do better. And they start to share their grievances outside of the relationship. They start to share with the barista at Starbucks or the guy at the office, and they start to, share these negative perspectives that they have about their partner, and thinking inside, I could do better. And for many people, that is the turning point of what ends up building towards infidelity.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. One of the things that I've made a huge effort at is you couldn't go to anywhere on the planet and have somebody say that I've said a negative word about her. Like, it just doesn't It just doesn't happen. Like and so that like we have various rules, right? Like no women, no girls weekends, no guys nights out. Don't talk badly about each other.
And that goes back to that emotional maturity that we talked about a few minutes ago. When we lack a solid sense of self and when we are emotionally, psychologically immature, we want to triangulate. We want to create triangles because it builds us up in that way. So we go find a friend to complain to about something and we create these triangle relationships.
We get validated. Like, oh, that's right.
Yeah. Seeking validation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and do you find too, like you talked about the social media aspect before, but like if you are, not connecting with your spouse or not feeling loved or whatever, how like nowadays it's so easy just to go out there into the social media world and get those likes and those loves and I mean, there's always been, the option of going out, but it just seems like it's even easier now because just in a second you can go on your phone and shoot something out there to the world to try to get that love and everything.
Yeah. And this is a really complex topic. Dr. Bowen talked about it. Dr. David Schnarch talks about it. There's a lot of areas in psychology you can study. There's a book called Everything Isn't Terrible, which is a great book. I highly recommend couples read together. But it talks about how when we're born with this reflected sense of self, where we look at our parents and go, oh, I'm beautiful, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I'm worthy, all these things because I'm being reflected back to me through my parents that I am these things. But at some point in our life, if we don't flip that and we become and we're able to self-validate those things, if we continue to seek outside of ourselves for that knowledge that we're worthy, that we're enough, that we're valuable, that we're whatever smart, then we just constantly go looking into outside of us, social media for the likes. And that, when you bring it into a relationship, gets really interesting because when I need him to prop me up, to let me know, that's a heavy burden for him to constantly have to do. And at some point, he's not going to do that. And so if he isn't able to give me that validation the instant that I need it, I mean, it's great to build each other up, but to be dependent on that is another thing. And when we're dependent on that, then that means we really can't control ourselves emotionally. We can't control our anxiety. We're not emotionally intelligent enough to do that. So we start to control our partner. Because if I can't control myself, I have to control him in order to get that positive reflection back. And now we get into, now I'm stepping on his autonomy, and now there becomes resentment in the relationship. So yeah, that book is a really good book to start to look at ourselves in the mirror a little bit better, to see where we are still emotionally immature and need to do that self-work.
Sounds like a good one we should check out.
Yeah. You said Everything Isn't Terrible, right? Is that the name of it?
Everything is
Yeah. And you guys have 4 kids and, we're talking about social, we're talking about all of these different things and raising your children. I think one of the problems that we have now, and, this isn't a social commentary podcast, but I'm curious how you taught your kids to have that autonomy, to do that balance between being lifted up, because I think we're in a situation now, at our church, there's a ton of young families and the kids kind of have a free-for-all life a little bit, to where they're really, they're lifted up all the time with no discipline or anything like that. Yeah. And I think that creates adults that kind of have the issue that you have, which is low emotional intelligence and, the need and desire for other people to tell them how awesome they are all the time. Like, how did you guys raise your children to not do that?
Well,
I'm just assuming you did.
No,
I'm looking at that. I'm looking at it. We still got a 15-year-old at home. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, good luck.
And he's got a tremendous amount of confidence. So
I think teaching them certain principles really helps. Helping them to define who they are really helps, because then they're not needing to take on the emotions and necessarily the opinions and the beliefs of the world around them. So teaching them solid principles, I think, is a big part of that. Helping them to, I would not say we're experts at this. I think no one is really differentiated by the time they're 18. I certainly wasn't. I feel like I'm still working on it. No one is ever fully differentiated. We just have levels of becoming better at this. And so I think my kids, just like we are, they're still working on that. But noticing where we are, like for a fun experiment would be to just go 24 hours and just make a note of every time you are focusing on other people versus focusing on yourself. Where am I getting upset inside and wanting to control Robert because he loaded the dishwasher wrong, or shrunk my favorite shirt, or when he did laundry,
I did that just the other day.
Right. Where am I focusing on others so intensely, and the feedback that I'm getting from others versus just focusing on myself? And that's a really fun experiment to really look inside yourself and see. And I think those conversations with your kids are ongoing. We have a 29-year-old, and I think those conversations continue to happen.
Yeah, I think that. So in addition to what Charla said, I think that it's important because you sort of mentioned where, these kids are becoming adults now, right? I think it's important to make sure that your kids are not having to prop you up emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you have a child who, if you have this need to be always validated in everything because you're lacking a sense of self and you're poorly differentiated, and now your kids are propping you up. You're defined by your children, right? Your relationship is defined as this, Charlotte and I have kids. We're also married, right? Instead of Charlotte and I are married and we have children, right? And so I think that the more you, in any relationship in any age, I think the more that your children are having to prop you up and support your relationship, I think they're not working on themselves. Mm-hmm. And then what happens when they leave the house? They're like, well, my only purpose in life is to kind of keep my parents happy or reflect to my mom that she's good or whatever that is. And now these, we've cut the rudder, cut the tether on these poor kids. We've sent them out into the world without a purpose. Like they don't know what their purpose is. They haven't sought that out. And I think if anything, and so I'll move an aside. I spent a lot of time with, in my profession, I have my doctorate degree, but I spent a lot of time, even when I was in school, with kids who were getting the doctorate degree. They had no idea if they wanted to continue in the career path that they were in. They were just trying it out. And I'm thinking, you're just trying out a 3-year degree at the graduate level from USC. Like, man, your parents got to own something.
Yeah.
This is one heck of an experiment. And I've also been with people. It's like, oh, well, my dad wants me to be an accountant. So I'm going to be an accountant. And I was the worst kind of parent when it came to that. I'm like, they're like, what should I do? I'm like, what do you love? Mm-hmm. What do you love to do? What's your passion? Like, go do that. And then go take some general ed in college and figure out what it is that you want. I was lucky enough to go back to school at 33. And so I knew what I wanted. And then I was able to dive into that career. And now I'm not saying that's for everybody, but I'm just saying if you let these kids start to find out who they are,
and what they believe in,
and what their purpose is in life, and then just sort of help direct them in their purpose. Like they have questions, like, hey, I'm here to, I'm like the help desk at Staples or something, right? You have a question, or if not, I'm just going to sit here and scroll until but I'm always here. You have a question, like, great, I'm going to be happy to help you, and I'm going to give you some guidance, like, hey, like I think that's a great path. Probably a little dangerous to take that shortcut. You might want to take this. Right. So maybe you should do that. So I'm not suggesting we don't give guidance. I'm not suggesting we don't give values. And I said that as a lead in for Charlotte, because I know we're going to talk about that. But I'm not suggesting they don't give values, but our kids watch us. They watch everything that we do. If we're unhappy in a relationship, they know that. We can pretend that we're sticking it out for the kids, right? But they know. They know that mom and dad are not having a great relationship, even if they never saw you disagree. And by the way, I always worry about that when people say I never saw my parents fight. I'm like, ooh, so you never saw anybody resolve a disagreement? Did you see them hug and kiss? Like, I don't know, like, were they just hiding everything? So I don't know. I don't know.
Values is an interesting conversation. I'm glad Robert brought that up. I think that's a great way to help kids become more solid in who they are, is to talk about what our values are and talk to them about what's important to them and what their values are. We do this thing in our relationship every year that has probably transformed our relationship to a higher level more than anything else that we've ever done. And what we do is January, first week of January, we get a cabin. We go up into the mountains. We usually are snowed in, and there's a crater that gives geothermal place where we can go swim. Other than that, we're kind of like in our hotel room or the cabin, and we create a mission statement for our marriage, and we flesh out what our values are for our marriage and for our family, and we create intentional rituals and calendar out those rituals for the year. And so it's like, we've had people say, that's crazy. Why would you treat your relationship like a business? Oh, well, I don't know. How's your business doing? How's your relationship doing? What if we all treated our relationship a little bit more intentional like we do our business? Maybe it would be a little bit more successful. And that has up-leveled our relationship tenfold. Of all the things we learn about how to have a better friendship, how to manage conflict, that one piece took our marriage from good to like on fire. We sit and we have conversations first about how last year went, and we talk about what went right and what didn't, what we learned. And then we go, okay, what's important to us now? What's important to you in the context of our relationship? What's important to you? Well, what's important to you in the context of our family? Well, what's important to you? What's important to you in the context of our business? And we make these lists, and then we rank these lists in terms of hierarchy of what's most important to us of all. And then we go, okay, now from here, let's build out how this next year is going to look. Let's take these things that are so important to us, our family, our kids, and see our kids see this. Right. So helping our kids to become better, solid in who they are. You have principles, you have values, you know what you stand for, and they see that whether they choose those same values or not, they know mom and dad, that was important to them. They put mission statements up on the wall. They said that we were going to do these rituals, and we saw them do it. And maybe we should live our life that way a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean,
I love that. That's cool.
If you think about it, right, Michelle, like we change from year to year. Like we do. Our relationship changes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You guys you don't engage. You're right here in front of me, so I'm going to put fingers right. So the two of you don't engage in anything the same way you did when you were first married.
No.
True.
Like, I mean, and your conversations are different. Your bedtime routines are different. Your intimate connection and sex is different. Like everything is different. Yet, if you didn't make any adjustments in knowing who this person is who's next to you, if you didn't make any adjustments about finding out what's important to them, then all of a sudden, then you hear things, people say like, oh, well, we've just drifted apart. You didn't drift apart. You just didn't spend time trying to maintain that connection. There's drifting apart. Right. Drifting apart is negligence, right? Like, oh, well, I guess we're married, and that's what it is. So the beauty of this values assessment for us is that we change. We have different goals every year. Like, oh, this year I think maybe I want to work on, X, Y, or Z. Or these are some big projects that are coming up. Like, oh, hey, let's launch a podcast. Well, there's a project, right? Or maybe we're going to do a new course or whatever that is. And what do you feel called to do this year? Like, what do you want, Charlotte? I think last year, 2023, she says, I just want to get up every morning and let's just work out for 20 to 30 minutes. I'm like, okay, let's just do that, right? And it's not crazy, but we just, turn the TV off a little earlier, get everybody in bed, and we just get up at 6:15, 6:30, get a half hour in there, and we get a chance to talk and warm up, right? And it depends on the goals. And how can I support her if one of her goals is health and fitness? Now I know what's important to her. And if I know what's important to her, it's really easy for me to support her in the thing that she's articulated as, this is one of my top 10 things that I want to do this year. Like, great, easy. I'll help you support that. She's like, yeah. And I know that your goal is this, right? Is my goal harmony in the household or something like, so if my goal is that, then she's, if I start spinning up with the 15-year-old, she's like, what? Let's dial this back, right? Right. Let's search for a little harmony. And as it relates to, kind of the broader question that you ask about children, I think if we instill these values and help them understand what's important to them, not the values that the world tells them is important. Because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of voices out there that they hear. And as parents and as people in committed relationships with children, you realize that your voice is just one of many. And oftentimes not the most important voice to them in their head. And until we can get them connected with their true self, their value, what is important to you on these very things, when they understand their value set, then that is going to lead even their unconscious values, which is the part that we like to talk about. When they can dig into their unconscious values, they'll act on those unconscious values, right? And if they're strong enough in those values, then they don't need to be pushed around by every wind that blows left and right. They can make decisions that they feel are best for their direction, for their value, for their goals.
And then you start to live less for the likes.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
It's really being deliberate, right? Like that's the thing that I think most people don't realize. We've been married, it'll be 29 years this July. And, so we've been married about, similar. And when you tell people that, they look at you like you've got three heads, right? Like it's almost, which is just so sad. Yeah. We went back to a funeral in Oklahoma, and my family is just like watching an episode of Cops. But, one of our family members made the statement, like, she's in her late 30s, and she's like, and all my friends are on like their second divorce now. And like, she was listing off these things as if these were life goals. Like there's this timeline and milestone of the number of divorces you have by 40. And like, I'm trying to wrap my mind around that, but it really takes this deliberate action. And when it comes to kids, I've said this on the podcast before, but I got this text from my youngest, back in Father's Day, and it was an amazing text. I cried, all this stuff. But one of the things that she said that really struck both of us was that she always knew that our relationship was the rock, right? Like there was no question in her mind that anything else that's going on in the world, her life, our lives, whatever, that was that solidity, right? That was that.
Yes.
And I've heard it replied to or called a launching pad, like having that as that launching pad. And that's that bedrock of who our kids can be and how they can go off into the world.
And it's incredible that our oldest is married. He's 29 and he has an incredible relationship. We just have no idea the power that we have to influence generations by what they've witnessed in our relationship. It trickles down. They see it all and they know what they want based on what they saw in their parents. And when we help couples and when you guys help couples make a shift, you're not just helping that couple, you're helping generations of people because, I look at our son and he didn't have to go through what we went through in the beginning. He just has an incredible friendship with his wife, this amazing, amazing friendship. They go away now and they set their goals and their values for the year. Just not because we even taught them how to do it. They just saw it. They just saw us do it. We had our daughter, similar to the text you got. We had our daughter one time when she was probably like 12. She looked at us one day and she's like, "You guys are so cute. You guys are so cute." And I was like, "Oh, they want that. When you've modeled that for them, they want that. That's powerful. That's a gift we can give them."
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and really for us, I always joked with them, and there was a Cosby joke, and I know Cosby is persona non grata now, but he would be like, "I'll make two more that look just like you," right? Like that's so they always knew that this relationship took precedence over.
It was first,
else, right?
It was number one.
We have God, mom, them. Right. Sometimes the dog between those two.
Depending on the day.
When they were 14, 15-year-old girls, that was definitely
depending on the homework situation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate. I came from, my parents been married 54 years, something like that now. And so I came from a very solid home. And I can totally relate to that no matter what's been going on in my life, like I know mom and dad are there and they're solid, and because that solidness in them there's just a strength there and just a comfort there that I know that's always going to be there. And so I know all three of you have come from divorced homes, so I can't even imagine what that would be.
I tried to warn her. She didn't really get it until she got it.
But think about that, right? So Michelle, you knew it was possible.
Yeah.
Right. And think about where we are now with these couples that are getting married and their parents were divorced. They can't see it. They don't see that a successful relationship is possible. They think that it's an eventuality, right? Like Kevin's family, right? Eventuality that I'm just going to hit my next divorce and I'm just waiting for that to happen. Like, okay, well, I guess that's going to happen. Right. and that's the thing, and it's funny, we talk about, and I'm sure you guys are very similar, before every one of our podcasts, we pray. And while we don't spend a lot of time on the religious side on our faith in the podcast, we still pray, like, just let us help one couple. That's just our mission, right? Because we know that if we can change the trajectory for a couple, then we can change their children's lives, and we can create better leaders, and we can create better families, right? Because it's just so important. And we can create a lot more happiness and a lot less strife. And boy, there's a whole host of problems that happen with single parents, but that's just a depressing stat. There's all kinds of bad stuff that goes there, but.
And that's not to say, like, just playing the devil's advocate for a second, that's not to say that there aren't situations where divorce is appropriate. There are abusive situations, of course. But when we talk this way, what we're really talking about is, you're a good person. You're in a relationship with a good person who's doing their best. You're both trying to grow. Let's work on that, because there's skills that you can learn, even if things have been hard, like they were for us, where conflict, was really difficult for us to manage, where we lacked any sort of conflict management skills. You can learn that stuff as long as you're with someone who is a good person. By and large, we can learn how to have a solid, secure relationship.
Yeah,
right.
There's not too many relationships that are beyond repair. Honestly, if as long as both people are willing to try and put in the effort, and there's love there, that's, it's not easy, right? Just like any new skill, right? Learning things is hard. We all suck the first time we do anything new, and as long as we understand that, then we can just move through it. And friendship as really as a friendship is one of the core foundations. As long as we have a good friendship, we still like each other. There was love there, right? We can build on friendship. And then once we build on friendship, then we can learn how to manage conflict
a little bit better. And then we can do things like go to the mountains and create our values and mission statement, right? So we look at it as these three main tenets to building a relationship. First, core, number one, friendship, right? What are the things we need to do to rebuild friendship? Second is, okay, we've probably lost that friendship because we poorly managed conflict, and there's been some resentment that is built up. So let's learn how to not resolve conflict, but how to manage conflict differently. And then the third tenet is, how do we create shared meaning systems for our relationship? And that's where we talk about rituals, values, creating a legacy together, and supporting each other's dreams, right? Sometimes our dreams align together. Sometimes he has a dream to, you're riding a century this weekend on his bike. That's not my thing, but I'm going to be there and I'm going to support him and I'll be at the finish line. So, those are the three areas: creating shared meaning, learning how to navigate conflict better, and how to manage our emotional intelligence as we do that. And then how do we build friendship? And if we can do those three things, you can have a very secure, very healthy, very happy relationship.
Good stuff.
And I feel like that kind of helps with that connection, right? Like we faced a few weeks ago, actually, just we were like, man, we feel so disconnected, and we're spending a lot of time apart. Even though I've worked out of the house for 30 years, right? We've been in this house for 20, and she's a stay-at-home mom. So like to think, well, how could you guys be disconnected, right? Like you're in the same house all the time, but we realized that our schedule was being weird, and like, we weren't really talking and communicating. She was doing her thing. I'm doing my thing. I run a bunch of businesses. But then we're like, okay, we full stop. How do we fix this? What do we do?
Right. Yeah.
And so then she was like, well, one of the things that really bothers me is when you get up early and do your workout. And we've been fitness buffs forever. And so when you do your workout separately, and then you kind of do your weights later in the day, and I have to do. So anyway, there's this kind of one of these shared experiences that we lost, right? So in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we have re-engineered our schedule. And I realize not everybody can do it at this extreme, but basically we block off our morning until 10 a.m. So we get up every morning, we do a walk or a run, we do our weights together, we have breakfast together, and then things start at 10, right? And so that has been huge, just amazing. That just like, it's almost like, all right, well, we flipped the switch, we're reconnected now, right? Like it's the extension cord when the saw stops, right? It was disconnected, and we reconnected it, and and things are good to go. But that connection goes around all of those pillars as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's the power of rituals. That's what we call them, right? We call them rituals of connection. And we take and create rituals very intentionally based off of our values. So we find our values first. In your case, like, being healthy is really important to the two of you. So that would be one of your core values. So how do we create rituals around that? And you did, and now you have a better connection. For someone else who maybe that isn't as important to them, they would just look at what is and then build rituals from that. And we have some very specific rituals that we love to recommend, like having a weekly marriage meeting. We feel like that is such a powerful thing for couples to do. We suggest rituals for how people say goodbye in the morning when they don't work from home, or how they say goodbye in the morning, and make sure that it's a 2-minute hug or a 30-second kiss, or there's some way of finding out what do you have planned for the day? Well, what do you have planned for the day, so that you can have something to follow up with later. We have rituals around how we greet each other at the end of the day. Robert always comes in, he swoops my hair to the side, and he kisses me on the back of my neck. That's like our greeting at when he gets home from work. Or, if you can build out those rituals, and then, like you said, when you notice you've missed a few days or a few weeks have gone by, that's when you correct, because those rituals really bring you back together.
Yeah, everything else will go on in the world as long as you guys are together. Like, and we're in the middle of sort of revamping our recording space. So you can probably see like gray on one half and white on the other. There's supposed to be some wood that's going up over there. And I almost tore the whole studio apart last night, but then I remembered we had this podcast today. And Charlotte said something the other day. She goes, "Yeah, it's just been really busy. There's been a lot of projects. I don't feel as connected to you."
Yeah.
And so guess what? Like, I didn't do that last night. We just sat down and just spent some time connecting with each other. So my favorite way to describe the greeting part when I come home is I'll come in, and the 15-year-old, he's standing there. And of course, he wants to wants to say something to me, and he gets a real quick high five, and I go right over to her. Right. That's showing him that she is the most important thing to me in the room. And then I'll come back and I'll have a conversation with him. Right. But it's always her first, him second. And, if she's not home, then it'll be him first or whatever. And a 15-year-old who's playing sports is probably just wanting to know where the frozen burritos are. I doubt that there's a lot of other wisdom that he's seeking from me at this point. But that's just one of those, a couple of things. And really it's cool to spend time talking about your day. So you guys are working out, so you're already going to have that, like, what's going on in her day. He knows what's going on in your day. Like, what's happening? Is there a school thing? Is there a work thing? Is whatever, right? And that's a great way to, I'll check in with Charlotte at lunch, even if I'm, heading to another meeting. I'll just call her and say, "Hey, how did it go? I know you had a client this morning." Right. Yeah. And so now we're just sort of maintaining that connection. And she likes to tell the story about how I call her on my way home from work. And my office is 4.5 minutes away. The one that's 4.5 minutes away. I'll call her on my way home from work. "Hey, how's things going? Like, did you want to hop in the car and we'll run over and get some vitamin water or something at the local gas station or something," right? Like, just one of our little rituals. But that's a way that we can decompress at the end of the day for 10, 15 minutes. We're alone in the car. We've created that space, and then we're back. And I know that, all your listeners and people, some people have young kids. Some people don't have the opportunity to do that, but there's always a way to sneak 10 minutes away, right? Going to bed a little bit earlier instead of staying up, and just communicate about what's going on. And those rituals will just build better connection. And I love the fact that you guys just sort of felt that, and then you just, like, you made a ritual that connected. And so it's amazing, right? You already feel better. I actually, when you replay the video, you should see the smile that was on each of your face. When you it was great. You talked about that, and I could tell that just brought, amazing joy to you in that connection. So,
yeah, what Robert described when he calls me on the way home from work, that is, as he said, that is another ritual that we have. And we usually go get a drink, and we go for a 20-minute drive. But it's more than that, because what the research actually shows is couples that have struggled, and the ones that were therapy, it used to be the couples that would go to therapy would actually have a higher likelihood of divorce than those who didn't go to therapy. That was pretty bad.
Wow.
But one of the things the research shows now is that the ones that actually make the changes stick, the ones that don't relapse, what they do differently is they have something called stress reducing conversations with each other, where they have this opportunity to share what happened in their day, the good and the bad, and not necessarily have to fix anything, just to talk. Like, you can share what was hard in your day. I can just show empathy. He can do the same for me. And we just do that for like 10, 15, 20 minutes. And those couples that did that had a far less likelihood of relapse than those who didn't. Just having that 20-minute stress reducing conversation. It's what insulates your relationship from the outside world.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you're calling it ritual too, right? Because it's like just things that we do, right? That's the, I make it a habit every, my office is kind of here. The kitchen is directly behind this door. And she's a baker not by trade, but she does a ton of baking. Mm-hmm. And so I always make it a point, if I walk into the kitchen, I always have to usually give her a hug behind her back, or, the consummate butt slap that's required.
Absolutely.
You walk through, but that's part of, that's one of those habits that you do in order. And it really, like you're saying, it doesn't take that much time. It really doesn't take that much effort. But I think it's so easy to get lazy about it, right? Like to just let's just be married and stay married. Like, I don't really have to work at that. And I think, this is a podcast primarily for, geared towards men, but I think men are even more guilty than women in this, in this thing, which is probably why it explains the much higher incidence of divorce being initiated by women than by men, because men are like, hey, things are fine. I'm just going to sit back, right?
Right. Yeah. I heard Jordan Peterson talk about that statistic once, and he was saying, part of it is also because women generally feel emotion. Sometimes, this is broad strokes, but we feel emotion much more intensely, where men are more likely to, like you said, go along and just keep just plugging away, regardless of how it feels. They've sort of been maybe even conditioned to push those negative emotions down. Women are going to feel them more rise to the surface. And maybe that is a big part of this, this gap, this divorce gap of why it is so many women are filing for divorce more than men. I think men not to go off on a total tangent, but it's not easy for men in divorce either. Like, the world has not made it very favorable for them. So I think they're much more likely to just suck it up and live unhappily than women are.
Yeah, and there's things you can do, and when we talk about the guys that are probably listening to this, right? You have to ask yourself, have I put the effort into my relationship that I put into my personal and professional success? Mm-hmm. Have I done that, or have I just assumed that this is going to take care of itself, right? And those of us who have people who manage divisions of companies, right? Like, right, she's the CEO of the household. Report. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for that report. Looks like there's some things you need to fix. Correct. Done. Right. So, I think that if you'll take that same goal setting, values, and importance on making sure that you're hitting the right metrics in your relationship, is my connection, right? Am I spending time building her up? Am I spending time building my relationship? Do I feel like we're successful? Am I taking time to retool? Companies have retreats. What do you do that for? We get people together. We're looking to connect. Like, what are the goals of said company retreat, right? We're going to retreat. We're going to get everybody together. We're going to actually do some study. We're going to develop some new programs. I'm sorry, that's exactly what happens in a marriage retreat. We do the same thing. We do a company retreat to bring the important people in our company together to help build them up and get everybody on the same page. Why don't we do a marriage retreat, which we call ours, and people get a little bit upset sometimes. Like, we're doing a marriage retreat, and we're going to get the two most important people in the business of the Snow household together, and we're going to talk about goals for what happens. We're going to create a mission and a vision statement, and we're going to hold each other to it, right? And we're going to support each other to it.
And your retreat has two members. That's it. Just you and your partner. Just you and your spouse. That's who comes to the retreat. Yeah, I love that. I love that. In business, what do they talk about? They talk about like either mission or vision statement, and then they talk about strategies, and then they talk about tactics, right? So for us, we take that mission, strategies, and tactics, and we call them mission, values, and rituals. It's the same thing. So it's going back to what you said earlier. Are we being deliberate in our relationship?
And intentional.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that she would resonate if I start using the phrase KPI, of our relationship, which is key performance index, right? Like that's the new buzzword.
And I was talking to your guys on that one, right? The ones who are like, always trying to figure out what their metrics are, the KPIs. Yeah.
No, but I mean, there really are, key performance indexes in your relationship, right? Like her happiness, my happiness, our connection, our intimacy, and all of those things. But going back to what we were talking about with like butt slaps and like kiss on the neck and those kind of things. Yeah. Having that, we had a discussion the other night. We were talking about intimacy and sex and all of these different things. But I'm a physical touch love language guy, and I made the point, which is great. That's why you enjoy that kiss on the neck, right? But I made the point to her because it's easy for both men and women. And women, I think, misunderstand this a little bit. That it's not always about sex, right? Sex isn't always about sex. It's our physical touch, isn't it? And I said, hey, I just need that slap on the butt or put your arm around me or touch my shoulder or whatever. And she actually this conversation just happened 3 nights ago, something like that. Yeah. And over the last 2 days, she's made a concerted effort to do those things. And my love tank, we use Dr. Chapman's 5 love languages, but my love tank is so much more full now, right? And so then that, thank you very much.
Atta girl.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We learned that years ago as well, how important that is. We were, funny story, real quick. We were driving in the car. We were at a really busy time in our marriage and growing in businesses. And we were going for a drive.
Funny story.
Yeah. And I remember going around this roundabout and I was thinking of what a great wife I was. And I said, honey, tell me, like, can you remember a time when you felt really loved by me? And I had a list in my back pocket of all the things I had done. So I was certain that he had a list to give me that. And he got really quiet. And I'm like, what is going on right now? And he didn't say anything for like minutes. And then he goes, I don't know. I can't really think of anything right now. And so that was this was, years ago, but that was the moment when I realized I wasn't feeding his love language. Mine is touch. And so, we tend to give love in the way that we want to receive it. So every time I would get in the car, I would reach over, put my hand under his seatbelt and kind of rest it on his leg. Every time we would drive, that would be where my hand would go because I was constantly touching him. Why? That's what I wanted.
That's you needed.
Whereas he was constantly affirming me, constantly building me up with words, which meant nothing to me because that wasn't my love language. And so eventually we started to see, oh my gosh, we are giving each other what we want rather than what we need. We need to figure out what it is that we actually need. And then once we got that was huge. I know. And he still sometimes reminds me, he'll like come into the bathroom in the morning. He's like, hey, how do I look today, honey? And it's like, hint, hint, hint. Oh, you look so handsome today, right? He's like hinting for the words of affirmation. And sometimes I'll reach over and still, put my hand on his thigh when we're driving the car and he knows, oh, she needs another kiss on the neck, right?
Yeah. Well, you do look great today, Robert, just so you
know.
Hair's on point. Yeah.
So I love the fact that you brought that up. Actually, just the fact that your physical touch and there's a lot of this, especially if we work with the 5 love languages and we work in an area called unconscious love language, which is a little bit different. But so oftentimes what happens is women will, they like, he only touches me when he wants to have sex. And by the way, if you're not having regular, for whatever that means, and there's some research that defines what regular intimate connection with your spouse or
it's
your
3
partner.
times a day, right, Robert? That's what the number is.
So if you're not having if you're not having sex, right, often because hey, there's babies and and you got a baby plus a baby kind of a thing, and you're tired and all these things. Then the only time that your husband's going to connect with you to get his dose of physical touch probably is going to be sex, right? So he's going to miss that. And you as a mom in this situation, you're constantly having babies pull on you and Like it's this whole thing, right? And it's like, I want people just to leave me alone. And so there's this sort of the disconnect, and resentment can start to build there, when the only thing he's really craving is just his love language. And it's so hard. But the better we are at sort of discerning this early, and then just feeding each other's love language. I mean, honestly, and I remember this with, we had two littles, probably one of them's breastfeeding, the other one's 18 months or two, right? And they both want to, sit on mom's lap, and hey, I want
to sit on mom's lap.
I want to sit on mom's lap, right? Like all of those types of things, right? Like, hey, honey, it's been 3 hours. So, I swear to you, I probably would have just been fine if she'd have just pat me on the head. Like it doesn't take much. If she'd have just take a second and held me, like that probably would have fixed that, right? So sometimes we're not talking, right? Like you said, the sex isn't necessarily the thing. It's really that physical connection. And usually within each partnership, there's somebody who depends on physical connection.
Yeah.
And there's the other person who probably really likes words of affirmation. And if you're the people listening trying to figure out which one they are, just figure out the way you like to give gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And if your gift is to write letters, long poems, and things like that, you're most likely you like to hear words.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if your gift, and if you want to give out experiences, or if you're going to give somebody a coupon for a massage, then you probably like physical touch.
Yeah. And what would you recommend if a guy's listening now? Like, what's the best way to communicate that? Right. Because we didn't have a fight, but we didn't not have a fight about it when we were, kind of working through this stuff. And it becomes something that it's a little touchy. We've been married for almost 30 years, and we still have issues talking about sex and communicating about sex. And I think that's fairly common. But how would a guy communicate that with his wife to say, look, and because you guys are rare, right, to have a wife that's physical touch and a husband that's words of affirmation, that tends to be reversed statistically. But if the guy's like, I need to communicate this because my wife thinks all I want to use her for is sex, how do I communicate that it's not about that?
So I know Charlotte's got a great answer, and we could do a whole nother show about communicating about sex. Needs.
We need to do that. We need to do another episode about sex.
We'll do one. That's fine. We love that. Charlotte always says it's her favorite topic, but it is. So here's the thing. As guys, we don't want to be seen as weak. That's just generally speaking, broad strokes. And if we don't want to be seen as weak, then we're not really going to spend time talking about what we need. Our job really is, like, if we back it out to the, to the tacit conversation that my grandfather had with me, because I didn't have a dad around, right? The only thing he told me was my highest and best goal was to be a dad, was to support my family. That was it. And support my family meant I'm taking care of stuff around the house. I'm making sure that everybody's comfortable and well fed. I'm making sure that, I'm earning money. Right. And
i.e. foregoing his own needs.
Yeah. I.e. never once was there any conversation in there about making sure that my needs were met. Because as a guy, our needs come third, fifth, sixth, seventh. Right. Honestly, right. Like, I mean, from everything from women and children first, they're getting off the plane or the bus or whatever else to make sure everybody's safe. Even if I got to jump in front of a moving car on the crosswalk, like all of those things, like my needs aren't as important as my family's needs. So how do we translate that from this masculine energy into, like, honey, I really just need you to touch me on my back or my arm, or can you hold my hand? And then sort of a little bit worried that the judgment is going to come, like, you wuss, like, what do you need somebody to hold your hand for? Right. Like, no, that's our inner dialogue, Michelle. Like, that's my inner dialogue. If I tell her that I need something, if it wasn't her and it was somebody at work, I'd be called out.
Yeah.
I'd be called out for being weak and being a wuss. Like, right. And so so as a result, because 90% of the time we're really not at home that much, right? We're in this world that's pretty hard on us. We don't get to talk about what our needs are. And so we just shut it down until, unfortunately,
a blow up,
or in an unfortunate situation, somebody meets their needs other than their wife.
Yeah. Right.
Somebody's spending time asking them about what their needs are in a safe environment.
Yeah.
And then this is what happens to relationships.
We're really big on training couples how to have conversations about their needs, and how at our core, we all have the same basic human needs. We all have a need for sustenance. We all have a need for empathy. We all have a need for love, for connection. Like, there's a number of things, but he's no different than I am. And when we can have empathy and see each other as having the same needs that we have, we can start to have conversations about both of our needs. And that doesn't mean that one person ever needs to forego their own needs in order to meet the needs of their partner. There's always a way. There's always a way to find a solution, a win-win where both people can get their needs met. We just have to start talking about our needs. And there's certain things that we are trained to do, that we're kind of taught, even educated to do, that are not conducive for getting our needs met. We're sort of indoctrinated with the idea that we need to use criticism to get our needs met, or blame, or insults, or make demands instead of requests. But when we can teach people the language of love and the language of needs and the language to be able to communicate our needs, we actually really enjoy helping each other get our needs met. As long as we avoid those criticisms and insults and demands, we love to help each other meet our needs. We want to. It's when we've done those other things and resentment has set in because we've made demands of each other and we've stepped on each other's autonomy and we've used criticism and contempt. Now it's made it really hard for me to want to help you to get your needs met if those things have been going on. But when we can pull those things out and communicate, hey, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling really disconnected and lonely, and I miss you, and I love spending time with you. And what I'd really like for us to do is spend a romantic night together, or go out on a date, or I'd love to have sex with you and just be with you tonight. Would that be okay with you? If we're making requests and we're doing it in a way that isn't critical, we want to help each other meet our needs. So we just need to learn to communicate in the language of speaking in a certain way that is conducive for getting our needs met.
I always say if I do everything I can to meet her needs and she does everything she can to meet my needs, guess what? Everybody's needs get met. It's kind of this magic equation. But
and Tanya, the way that you put that there too is that makes, as you're saying that, I'm just thinking like that makes the person feel special too, because I'm the one person that can meet that need, that can feel you like that instead of, like you said, instead of being criticized about it, you're suddenly like, it kind of lifts you up. You're like, oh wow, okay, that he needs that from me because I'm the one that gives that to him. So I like that. Mm-hmm.
I mean, think of the difference, right? I could come in and say, you've been really selfish and you haven't given me any time this week. And, you are this, you are this, you are that, right? And I want sex. Well, I'm sorry, that's not going to work. But if I come in and I'm like, hey, honey, we've been both really busy with work and, we've recorded like 3 podcasts this week and we haven't had very much time for each other and I miss you and I just need to connect with you. I need to feel loved. And I have this need for connection right now. Could we go play?
Yeah.
That sounds very different from you're a selfish pig who never gives me any time or attention. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's all in the framing.
I love that. Well, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate you coming. How do we learn more about what you guys going on? masteryourmarriagepodcast.com, right? Is that the one website? But
we're really active on social as well. So if you want to come over and find us on Instagram, it's Master Your Marriage on Instagram. And then we have our podcast. We talk a lot about needs over there too. So Master Your Marriage podcast, if you want to take a listen. Most of our episodes are short and quick and try to give value in 20 minutes to 30 minutes. And if we can help you out, let us know.
Yeah, that and the website. There's always a contact form on the website. I think there's a couple of courses on there and some other things that are just going to be, coming soon, and information about a retreat if we're going to end up doing one this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, the best part about this podcast is meeting fun, interesting people that we connect with.
Absolutely.
And this has been an absolute joy. So I really appreciate you guys.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, you guys.
It was a joy to meet you both.